Hey, it's Lunchtime Live with Dr. Leslie Wakefield, physical therapist for pelvic floor health and women's sexual health specifically. And today I am answering a question that was submitted through YouTube, which is pretty cool, from Ampajo. And she asked, why are some women getting menstrual cramp type feeling when they're using the dilator, especially the larger dilator sizes? I gotta tell you, you stumped me. This was the first time I've heard this question. None of my patients have ever reported that. So I had to go and talk to some other pelvic PTs that I know and check out our chats and see who was saying what and what we can come up with. So I have a few options. Again, this isn't medical advice. I can't diagnose what's going on because I've never met you or evaluated you, but we can do education and we can sort of spitball what could be going on and brainstorm and work the problem. So first thing I'll say is you should definitely, hopefully at this point, have had a gynecologic exam, because there certainly are medical things that could be going on that could interfere with dilator use. And I know that that is a barrier for women with vaginismus, for people with vaginismus, because that's kind of everything that's scary and everything that's impossible, which is going to this physician that you probably don't know and having someone look at you and insert either fingers or a speculum. That's really scary. And I know that many women can't tolerate an internal exam. So that said, I get it, it's a challenge, but if you can get to the gynecologist to make sure that there's nothing medical or anatomically that could be interfering with dilator use, that's the number one thing. I do have a resource. It's the Gyno-Ready checklist, and it's for download. When you download, it signs you up for my newsletter. You can always unsubscribe if you don't want to get that every week, but it's a checklist to help you prepare mentally and physically to have that gynecologic exam. And you can fill it out and bring it with you, or just use it to brainstorm yourself. If you're worried about being anxious and not being able to advocate for yourself or communicate well with the doctor, you can even give it to them when you arrive. There's also some very doable strategies in terms of how to make yourself feel more comfortable and support yourself along the way. So check that out if going to the gynecologist seems impossible or just too scary to engage with, because I do think it's an important first step. And consider that when you're using dilators, you are treating yourself. So let's make sure that you're treating the right thing and there's nothing else that needs to be treated along the way. So that's number one. Number two, have we ruled out other medical issues that could cause a sensation of cramping or inflammation or pain in the pelvis, such as IBS, interstitial cystitis, endometriosis, adenomyosis? And if you don't know those words, that's your next Googling rabbit hole to go down. But there certainly are inflammatory conditions of the bowel that can cause pain, like cramping. There's endometriosis that can cause pelvic cramping. There's interstitial cystitis, which is a bladder pain syndrome, which can cause pelvic pain. So is there potentially another medical issue going on that could be contributing to a sensation of cramping when you're working with your dilators? So let's imagine we've cleared both of those things. You've had at least a basic gynecologic exam and been recommended to use dilators. You know how to use them safely. You have been cleared of any other medical issues like IBS, interstitial cystitis, endometriosis, adenomyosis, or something else that could cause pain, inflammation, cramping in the pelvis. And you're working with the dilators, and what this question was specific to is a larger size is starting to generate like a menstrual cramp type pain. So I brainstormed and I've got 3 potential causes, and I don't know which one applies to you. And I think that we all just have to do our own research and our homework, and I talk to our doctors and sort of start to eliminate some of these potential factors that could be causing discomfort. So the 3 that I came up with are: is it possible that the dilator is stimulating a bowel cramp? Number 2, is it possible that the dilator is stimulating your cervix? Or number 3, is it possible that you're getting some deep pelvic floor and deep abdominal muscle tension that's creating a cramp, a deep cramping feeling? Let's talk about each one and kind of brainstorm, workshop what could be going on. So the first one, could it be a bowel cramp? Sometimes bowel cramping, because the organs, the rectum, the bowel, the uterus, the ovaries, the fallopian tubes, they're all packed into this very close, tight spot in the pelvis, and stimulating one can certainly bump into and stimulate the others. So is it possible that the dilator is pressing posterior and maybe bumping up into the rectum and stimulating a cramping sensation? If you aren't quite sure about what angle of penetration you should be using, check out one of my other videos where we talked kind of in depth about the angle of penetration and depth of penetration. That is posted on YouTube, and there's not too many videos to sort through, so I'm sure you can find it. Number 2, are your bowels completely empty? Do you have constipation? Could there be some stool in the rectum that's making the bowel more sensitive or more irritable? So is there a way to completely empty your bowels before dilating, which might be like a little diagnostic for yourself to see, like, when my bowels are empty, I'm not getting this cramping, but when I'm more constipated or I haven't gone in a while, then I tend to get this cramping. Okay, we can probably narrow down that it's a bowel issue. And is there anything underlying that could make the bowel more reactive or more irritable? And if we've already cleared you for something like IBS, like a true irritable bowel syndrome, is there something spicy in the diet that could make the bowels more irritable? What could potentially be leading the bowels to go into like the spasm, cramping type sensation when something is introduced into the pelvic cavity, like a dilator? So that's bowel cramps. Number 2, is it possible that you're stimulating your cervix? This to me seems the most likely, because if the cervix is stimulated, it will many times elicit a sensation of cramping, very similar or even identical to a menstrual cramp. And those cramps certainly can spread through the pelvis. Many women getting a pap smear report a cramping sensation when that pap smear is done. Same thing for an IUD insertion. Many women with pain with deep penetration will report discomfort if the cervix is stimulated. So is it possible that these larger sized dilators are being inserted deeply and bumping into the cervix? I read on some of the forums, people were kind of poo-pooing the idea of the cervix because, yes, typically the cervix is very deep. You really have to be inserting the dilator all the way potentially to stimulate that. But I will argue with that. Actually, everybody's shaped differently and everyone's anatomy is different. And it's not just the cervix that is sensitive, but also the fallopian tubes and the ovaries. And depending on your anatomy and your particular angle and tilt, if you're pressing the dilator in deeply enough, could it be stimulating any of those other sensitive spots that are inside the pelvis? I think it could. So to me, that's the most likely culprit, is you're stimulating the cervix or some of those other deeper sensitive structures by inserting the dilator too deeply or at the wrong angle. So the solution for that, or the workshop for that, would be to change your angle of penetration. And again, I'll refer you back to that video that I did a couple weeks back. And even if, let's say you're lying on your back with your knees bent, which I think is a very typical position for people to dilate in, and they are trying to change the angle with like a wrist turn, if that's not helpful enough, have you considered actually changing your body position? So instead of lying on your back, maybe you roll onto your side into like a fetal position. And this would not just change the angle of the dilator, but even like the way gravity is settling into your pelvis and your pelvic organs, and maybe shift where your pressures are. So I would try different angles of penetration. I would try different body positions while dilating. And I would just double check that you're not inserting the dilator deeper than it needs to be. As I talked about in that other video, you really only need to work the dilator at the level of the pelvic floor, which is the first couple of inches at most. Any deeper than that, you're not really using the dilator for its intended use, which is desensitization of the reactivity of the pelvic floor muscles. And check out that video if that sounds like something interesting to you. So, could it be bowel cramps? Could it be stimulating the cervix or other sensitive pelvic structures? Could it be a deep abdominal muscle cramp, or even a pelvic floor muscle cramp. This to me seems the least likely because I imagine that a person using the dilator specifically for the purpose of treating vaginismus has a pretty good idea of what a pelvic floor muscle spasm feels like, but maybe not always. So what could happen is with the larger sizes of dilator, if the pelvic floor is getting a little too much stimulation or a little too much stretch, could there be a reactive contraction and spasm? Yeah, that's definitely possible. If using the larger size dilator is stimulating anxiety or tension in the body, could that stimulate a deep abdominal spasm? Yeah, it definitely could. So to kind of workshop and eliminate that from your list of possible causes, I would suggest maybe using a deep heat, like a heating pad right over your pelvis. I would suggest maybe even working in the bathtub, like a nice warm bath, to help all these other accessory muscles and hips and abdomen, all these muscles relax while you're dilating, so we're not getting any unnecessary tension or buildup of pressure. Again, change the angle to make sure you're not pressing too hard into the pelvic floor. And check in with your breathing. Are you holding your breath? Are you accidentally tensing your abs? We definitely recommend deep breathing and like relaxed hip positions, so almost like a butterfly stretch, or even like that happy baby pose from yoga is a really good one for helping relax the pelvic floor and the hip muscles. So check out your position, consider using some heat or something else to help your muscles relax very directly. Some women with menstrual cramps will use a TENS machine, like you can buy them on Amazon. They're meant for orthopedic type pain, but actually there's some good research using them for menstrual cramps, and might that help distract you from any extra sensation to help you relax? Maybe. It's worth a shot. So, very short version of that longer answer. I don't know why you're getting menstrual type cramping while you're using the larger size dilators, but my guess is it's either related to stimulating the bowel, stimulating the cervix, or getting some extra muscle cramping because of tension or overstimulation. And we just talked about a few ways to troubleshoot those and sort of process of elimination. Just try one at a time and see what makes the biggest difference. That'll probably point you in the direction of what's actually causing the discomfort. I hope that helped. I will put a link to that Gyno-Ready checklist that we talked about. If you're interested in watching the other video that I mentioned talking about the angle and depth of penetration we're using a dilator, check that out on YouTube. And as always, I would love it if you would like or follow or submit questions. You can submit questions either live on Facebook Live. I do this every Wednesday at 12:30 Eastern Time, or on YouTube in the comments, or on Facebook in the comments, or you can message me. I'll try and check all that stuff on a semi-regular basis. So if you have questions, I'm sure I'll get it along the way. I would love to answer it. I will see you next week. Happy holidays.